Hi, my name is Russell Lucas. I'm a theatre maker and I interview other theatre makers. So I've got Oliver Senton on the channel today. I met Oliver through Twitter a couple of years ago and we've had a couple of decent coffee chats over the years about theatre's history and ecology. So I wanted to get him on the channel to talk about his thoughts for the future. It's the first time I've ever had a philosophical conversation on the channel, so do enjoy and click to subscribe. Hi Oliver, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, good. Thank you for coming on the channel today. You're going to talk about a very brave topic, which is your ideas on the future of theatre. But we'll get to that in a moment. So first of all, I'm getting everybody to kind of introduce themselves,
Yeah.
who you are, how do you define yourself, maybe what type of work you prefer, what type of work you're doing right now. So who are you, Oliver?
Well, I am essentially an actor, but I often describe myself as a theatre maker because, particularly in this country, if you say actor, then some people will think that all you do is kind of learn lines and perform roles. Whereas for me, an actor is the center of a process in which there is a team of makers and everyone is sort of on a level. As opposed to those awful phrases, creatives and by inference, non-creatives, which I can't bear. But essentially what I bring to the table, as well as a little bit of directing and dramaturgy, is being an actor.
That's really interesting. Yeah, the evolution of the term theatre maker is something that fascinates me a lot, actually. I think more and more people are using it. Yeah, who knows?
Yeah.
So your first question is, I'm kind of stealing a little bit from Oprah Winfrey here because she asked this question occasionally. I really like it. She says, you are where you are, and what have you learned so far? So I'm just going to reframe that question a little bit for you.
Mm-hmm.
You've worked
Yep.
in the theatre industry for decades.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what sort of changes have you seen in the theatre? Albeit
Yeah.
good or bad, it doesn't matter. But what significant things for you have gone? Oh wow, that's a real shift.
Okay. I have to be careful answering this question because it's very easy to end up sounding like a bit of an old fart. But giving it a little bit of thought, I think the single most substantial thing that's affected an actor's life is the changes to the benefits system. That in right through the 60s and 70s, and I didn't leave drama school till 92. So even when I left drama school, right up to you could still do an acting job, go and sign on, get money for a few weeks, sign off, go and do an acting job. And you could do that. You could flit to and fro, or move to and fro, I should say. And there are still, of course, systems in other countries, France being a very good one, where that support is available. As long as actors are still looking for work and they do some work, there is a safety net for them. Of course, in this country, in the last 20, 25 years, that has closed in. So the benefit system now is only for the truly desperate, rather than those who might need a little bit of help for a little while and then move on with their next job. And that used to be the main way. I mean, when I was growing up and working with all kinds of actors older than me, really successful actors would go, there was no shame in that, of going, yeah, I'm going to go down the dole for a few weeks, but I know I'm off to Bolton in wherever and I'll go and do that job. And that was the normality. But that's obviously changed significantly. And that is, I think, one of the big things when we talk about the class mismatch in acting now, in terms of there being fewer opportunities for people on lower incomes or who haven't got inherited wealth or any kind of other source of income. That's the thing that's made the difference.
Wow.
You know, I think that's the single biggest change, that you can't go, oh, I'll be all right for a few weeks because I know I'll get a check in 2 weeks. It won't take me 3 months to work out my universal credit or whatever. I can do that and go on to my next job. So
Wow.
that's the biggest one that I could think of.
Gosh, I thought you'd say something like, "Well, I used to prefer red curtains over green curtains" or something, but I didn't expect that at all. That's fascinating because you and I'm a couple of years behind you, and I didn't come into the industry till late 90s, early noughties. So that kind of gravy train was over by then. I never even knew it existed. That's quite incredible, and another world. I
Yeah.
can't even think what that was like.
But it's interesting that you use the phrase gravy train there, which is still an inference that it's like a kind of an easy thing we do. But it was just part of life. I say it wasn't the idea of that that you were slacking to do that. That it was just a different mentality. Whereas now we've had it fed into us by decades of media and and government that only slackers do that. If you're really worth it, you'll get out there and get a job, get on your bike, like Norman Tebbit said. So our whole attitude has shifted.
Wow. And it really puts into focus what happened this year as well, that we seem to be kept on ice for quite a while before there's any sort of decision what was going to happen with arts funding and arts emergency bailouts, etc. That it did seem that we weren't being addressed. There's maybe that mentality is still there.
Oh, definitely. No, I really think so. And hopefully we'll work towards it. And this is a bit off piste, but I think universal basic income is a growing movement and would change so many people's lives for the better in that way.
Wow. I wish we could get it back.
The other thing, which is, we can go on talking about that if you like.
No, carry on. Tell us what was the other thing you said.
The other thing is probably less surprising, I would say, but I do think that people's expectations of the difference or there being no barrier between being an actor as a trade, as a profession, as a vocation, and being famous have become blurred.
Right.
The idea of becoming an actor because you want to be famous, and that you might have done, a bit of modeling or a bit of something else, and I'm going to have a go at acting. That's a real change, I think. And of course, I don't think that things like X Factor they're not the cause. They're just a symptom, of our shift into terms of. It's like I noticed that one of the contestants on Strictly Come Dancing, my son's a big fan of that, is described as a sports celebrity. What's that? Are you a sports person? Do you practice a sport? Or are you, what does that mean? Sports celebrity. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So this isn't something I see when I'm training actors, when I'm going into drama schools. Those people are dedicated because they've come up against the reality of what an actor's training is. But how it does manifest itself is when they leave. I think there's very much an attitude towards it's very biased towards screen work over stage work. And I can't help but think that part of that, as well as admiration of the craft of many brilliant actors, is the idea that you're up there and people are seeing you and you get a bigger profile quicker. And I like to quote, I've forgotten what the source of this quote is, but I like to quote a thing that was said, which was, you do film to get famous, you do TV to get rich, and you do theatre to get good at it.
Yes, I remember that. Yeah.
And I know that's a generalization, of course, that screen acting is a hugely skilled thing. But I think what it means is, I hear a lot of young actors going, I'm not going to do any touring, I'm not going to do any small scale work, I'm not going to do any kids theatre, because they want to do this much narrower band. Whereas I would certainly say the wider the variety, the wider the skills you can do. And wherever you can act, frankly, wherever you can do those things, go and learn.
Yeah.
As long as it's not something you deem to be offensive and you're getting paid, go and do it.
Yeah.
But those attitudes have changed, I think.
Yeah, it's one of those things I always say that, never emerge, never become the next best thing, because your career could potentially be over within 6 months. Just, resist that sort of labeling at all costs. So, again, going back to knowing what you know so far, what do you think theatre as a trade, we could actually keep an eye on ourselves to keep, ensure that we, evolve further, but also keep hold of?
I think the theatre community needs to be a little kinder to itself sometimes, because the reason that we have such heated arguments about things like BLM and Me Too and all kinds of inclusivity is because we're already really good at it. We're already really sensitive to those issues, and that's why we get so worked up about it. Whereas there are other industries, not all of them, there are other industries who are not as good. And it's because we've always been an inclusive community that we get very upset when we get these things wrong.
Mm.
But we need to remember that although, of course, there are things to be done and changes to be made, we're already doing quite well.
Yeah.
You know, we tend to leap to the other extreme and go, oh, this is what we're doing is terrible, but it's not true. It's a constant struggle. It's like that thing that John Osborne said: theatre just goes on dying as it has done for thousands of years. We're in a constant process of decay and renewal, and we're doing okay. So I think that's something we could keep an eye on. Give ourselves a pat on the back now and again and say, do you know what? You're doing a pretty good job at that. Just carry on. Don't drop it. Don't drop the ball, but carry on.
Yeah.
That would be one thing.
Yeah. And what about, because you're an actor, is there anything you think that the actor as a profession could keep an eye on as well? Because I'm always very passionate that the theatre is the actors, and I think as the years have gone on, that statement has probably become a bit inflammatory. When you say this out loud, say no, the theatre is the actor's space. Is there anything in the acting profession that you think actually we've got to keep an eye on this? Or
I think there's still a lot of work to be done in terms of breaking down the hierarchies in the buildings and in the rehearsal room. I'd really like to see an end, really, to that whole creative thing, the creatives, because it's a very subtle and invisible barrier, because if they're creative by inference, the actors are not. It's really not helpful. The team, the creative team, which is everybody, So that's something I don't think is very helpful. But hierarchies in the rehearsal room as well, the idea, which is still with us, perhaps a little less so in Britain, because we're quite irreverent as an industry. We are the world of panto and music hall, and that's still in our blood. But I still think there can be this thing that the director is the chef, the master in the room. When what I like to say is that they just have a different skill set. That they are there to make decisions and to oversee things, and of course they have responsibilities that the actors don't have. But it's wonderful when you get a director who, to put it crudely, trusts the actor to do what they do.
Yeah. You can see that whenever I work with students, you can see that they are already ready to play the lowly slave the moment that you walk into the room. And I'm like, no, I'm waiting for you to do your job. Which is, let's work together, interpret the text, etc., etc.
And when you get into bigger rooms and you've got bigger teams, if you're up against someone who perhaps is, not that great at their job, you do look around the room and go, okay, so you're the movement director and you're the voice director. What are you doing? If you don't feel like, you're confident in voice or movement, you can have discussions with the designer, but what are you doing? Now, if that is someone who's gifted and talented, then their authority will be very clear and it'll be fine. But you do sometimes feel like you're someone who's assembled a really good team around you, but I'm not quite sure what you're bringing to the table. So it's an interesting area. But I think the younger actors now, you see the companies that are being made and the work that's being made at a grassroots level, which will work its way up the food chain slowly. And a lot of that is more collaborative, more devising based, even when it's a version of a existing play. So I think it's happening, but it's happening slowly.
And like you say, it's enough for us to keep dissecting, isn't it, and keep having the conversations, and then the theatre will continue to morph into whatever it will be. But just keeping this idea that the theatre is going to grow and progress, is there anything you want to keep hold of or bring back, do you think, in the profession, in the trade, in the skill set of the actor? Are there any sort of like little treasures you go, yes, but we must keep hold of this, or I would like this to return?
I think the thing that we're beginning to do much more, which we definitely need to keep, is the fact that encouraging young artists, young actors, young whoever they are, theatre makers, let's call them, to make their own work more, all of them.
Mm.
Write, produce, make their own work, whatever that may be, to form groups and to understand that when you find people you love working with, hang on to them for God's sake, because they don't come around every day, you know, and to form those groups and to form that work. But that is being done more because the drama schools and other colleges like can see the way the market is moving. They know that people need a greater fluidity of skills to survive, you know, and whether that means doing a mixture of theatre and corporate work and educational work and online work, whatever it may be, they've got to have that to survive. So that's something we need to keep pushing. Two things I'd like to, a small thing, it's wonderful when it happens, I'd love there to be more of, is that in the big buildings, see young companies fostered, you know. So like when Richard Eyre was at the National and he divided up the building and he brought in all kinds of young directors and young theatre makers to make stuff in new spaces, all the big buildings should be doing that.
Yeah.
You know, there's no reason why the RSC shouldn't be saying to Rashdash or In Bed with My Brother, come and do Timon of Athens. If they want to, they might not want to, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I'd like to see much more of that in the big buildings.
Yeah.
And in terms of that mixing more radically, there is still an element in which I didn't grow up in the rep system. It was pretty much gone by the time early 90s I started. But I think it's something that people still love when it happens. As an economic model, it's much cheaper, just something I never tried to get my head around. Why don't people do it more? Because it saves you a bomb on actors. But also it lets people feel community ownership of those actors. And what you have, like what's really good in Germany, and I'd love to see this in this country, is that it's the same company doing The Ugly Duckling in the afternoon and Hamlet at night. It's the same actors, you know. So that would be an amazing thing, to break down those divisions, to have those people doing whatever is in the rep for whatever audiences are coming to that theatre. It's the same company. I wouldn't go as far as saying we should go the lifelong civil service actors. I think that's deathly. But, you know, for a year or two, you keep people, or seasonally you keep people, and they do all the work. I think that would be really interesting.
Yeah. It's fascinating because we, you know, just opening this conversation, there are 3 interviews in this one. I need to get you back for another 2 times, I think, because it's such a huge subject. But thank you for doing the first kind of philosophical interview on the channel, because it's something that I want to prod more at, because the nature of this channel is about you know, grassroots theatre makers talking to each other, rather than interviewing the same people, having the same platforms. And I wanted to push into that area, which is really useful because we've done it today. But is there anything else you would add? Now you have this moment, and you're talking about theatre's future and pondering on it. Is there anything else that's come into your...
I think what's been really interesting about the events of the last 6 months and how it's made all kinds of organizations look at what they do and how they do it, that the revolution of pay what you can is something that is very beneficial, and we're going to kind of see expanding the economic models of how we pay for theatre. Because what is absolutely unquestionable is that people know we've got to make the buildings, the institutions, the spaces more welcoming, whether they're online or whether they're real. You know, how do we do that? And a lot of it does come down to economics. You know, so I think you know, paying what you can and trusting the audience more, that they will support you, because all the feedback on those systems shows that it really works. People usually pay above what you expect them to pay on average.
Yeah, it's the bucket in Edinburgh, isn't it? It's the free fringe. It's, you know, if you put out a good show and you stand there with your bucket, and you go, that's pay what you can. Almost.
Free fringe. Yeah, free fringe has been an amazing thing, and has put a bomb underneath the whole economic model of Edinburgh. I think, you know, before all this, amazing thing.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you so much, Oliver, for sharing those thoughts.
You're welcome.
All right, and I'll definitely get you back for another deeper question at some point.
Lovely, thank you.
All right then, bye.